Hello friends, I welcome you to the first lecture of Environment and Ecology. My name is Kovid Verma. Today we would be talking about the history of Indian forests under British Raj. Part 1 deals with the reasons for deforestation that occurred during the British Raj. And part 2 deals with the impacts of that deforestation and the British reaction to it. Okay, so if I were to represent the status of Indian forests after the British left. So this picture does it the best. As you can see here, it's lifeless. It's full of skeletons. And it's cruel. Let us see what were the reasons that this occurred in the first place. Is there one reason? No, there are many. Sometimes one reason leads to the next, and sometimes more than one reason results in the deforestation of Indian forest. You can pause this video for a while, have a look at this flow chart. One reason bleeding into the next and ultimately resulting in deforestation. The whole video is dedicated to studying of these elements in detail. So without any further ado, let us ask the first question. Why did the British come to India? Have a look at this picture. This painting depicts an event, a very important event from 1608. Jahangir has been visited by William Hawkins in his court. William Hawkins is a representative from the English East India Company. He just has one request. Your Highness, can you grant permission to EIC to build a factory in Surat? A factory in Surat. Surat, why is this place important? It's an important port of the time. One of the most important ports in the global economy of the time of the 16th and 17th century. EIC was a big company. It wanted a factory there. This factory was basically meant to be a trading post. A trading post in Surat could help you earn huge profits. And profits was something that enticed the English East Indian Company. Jahangir knew that this relationship is going to be a win-win situation. He said, I have no problem, let's dine and have some wine. And thus began the first major commercial breakthrough for English trading relationship with the Mughals. Mughals, why? Because they were the supreme authority within the subcontinent. If you were to establish any port, any factory in one of the major ports of India during that time, you would go and take permission from its ruler, the Mughals. Fast forward few years after, in 1614, Jahangir is visited by Sir Thomas Roe, who was sent by King James. So, if someone has been sent by a king to another king, then the matter is more or less political. What was the political matter that he wants to address? His question is, Your Highness, can you grant protection to EIC's factory in Surat? Grant protection, what kind of? This protection is from the Portuguese East India Company. We are talking about the times when there was cutthroat competition between rival companies. When I say cutthroat, I mean it. It's not figurative. It's a reality. These adversaries were ready to kill each other in broad daylight just to earn better profits. So Thomas Roe wanted protection, royal protection from Jahangir for the EIC's factory, for the English factory in Surat. Jahangir said, okay, no problem, let's dine and have some wine. And this is considered as the second major commercial breakthrough for English trading relationship with the Mughals. Okay, so by this time, English has established itself at least in front of the Mughal authority as a trading entity, and it continued functioning as a trading entity for long. However, its ambitions transformed from trade to territory. But when exactly did this happen? If I were to answer this question, then I would say it happened in 1765. It was in this year that English, represented by Lord Robert Clive, would take certain political authority from Shah Alam, the Mughal emperor of the times. What was the nature of this political authority? So Robert Clive, after winning a battle with Shah Alam, asked him that now you are a loser, why don't you grant me all the financial administration rights to the province of Bengal? Meaning, whatever money, whatever revenue comes out of Bengal would be mine, and I use it the way I want. He said, okay, yes, not a problem, because I don't have any other option. Just don't blind me for life, which the English actually did. They wanted to blind this fellow and wanted to make sure that he never stands as a threat, and wanted to convey this message to other royalties across India that if you are our enemy, then you would have to suffer even if you negotiate with us. So this is considered as the first major political breakthrough for English in the subcontinent. Here we can see that in 1765, English were able to bring this part of territory, Bengal, some parts of Orissa, Bihar, Bangladesh as well, and a coastal strip of Orissa under their control. By 1800, this control expanded, covered large parts of Indian peninsula, almost the whole of South India. By 1850, British were directly or indirectly controlling almost the whole India, Pakistan and Bangladesh of the present, some parts of Myanmar as well. So this is how their political authority expanded with time. Imagine the kind of authority, the kind of rule they were able to exercise over large expanse of Indian territory. Okay, now the second question or the second theme that we are discussing in this lecture, real wages in England. Okay, so real wages in England. As we can see here, this graph depicts the average real wage in England for this time span of 150 years, and there is a sudden rise of this real wage from 1800, and this rise is consistent till 1850. This is considered as the period of high growth. What resulted in this period of high growth? The reason lies in the period preceding it. What happened in this period? A number of things. To start with, this machine, which goes by the name spinning jenny, was invented by James Hargreaves in 1764. This is the guy, James Hargreaves. What does this machine do? It takes up a number of spindles, spins them, and makes sure that a lot of thread is produced from a lot of raw fiber. It does all this in very less time and using only one labor. Only one worker, by spinning this wheel, can make sure that the work of more than 20 workers is being done through this single machine and in a very less span of time. Now imagine this machine working with another machine which does mechanizes the process of weaving, a power loom. So what we have now is a foundation for modern mill. So it was in this period that the foundation for modern mill was laid. Okay, this is just one example. Another example, this fellow is James Watt, and he came up with a tweaked version of a steam engine in 1765. He named it Watt's steam engine. This was a manipulation done in the existing steam engine technology, but it increased the performance of this engine manifold, and it could be used for n number of activities. Most important of them was pumping water. British industries required pumping water in many scenarios. Most importantly, pumping water from mines so that you could keep on mining the area until you have exhausted all the coal. Or the steam engine could be used to power the spinning jenny and the power loom as well. So a modern mill could be automated. Another example, steam engine is being used by this guy Trevithick to come up with a steam locomotive. So now we have a steam engine which could be used to transport a heavy load from one place to the other. Foundation for railway was laid. To mention another example, cement or Portland cement, which was invented for the first time in 1824 by William Aspdin. Because of this invention, construction of large structures like railway platforms, dams, and buildings on a mass scale was now easy. These and many other such inventions occurred during this period, which increased the real wages of England manifold. So this is considered as the first phase of industrialization. It spans from roughly 1760 to 1830. This is a debatable span of time. Some people say that it spans from 1760 to 1900s. But nevertheless, this is relevant to our example. Developments like steam engine to run mills, steam locomotives, even mechanized lifts. Mechanized lifts were a boon for coal mining industry. It was only after the lift was invented that workers could work in a shift and their shifts could be exchanged immediately. It increased the efficiency and effectiveness of a worker manifold. So these were the inventions that propelled the phase of industrialization and increased the per capita income of people in England. The progress of industrialization was self-perpetuating. Every small invention that was given popularity or was funded by the state during this process of industrialization was selected by the government because of the reason that it helps in the process of industrialization. If your invention, if you would have been a scientist during those days, during the Victorian era, and you came up with a machine that could slice tomatoes in a very less span of time, you might not have gained recognition out of this invention. Why? Because whatever you are doing should be helpful in this progress, in this process of industrialization. All inventions and scientific milestones were utilitarian in nature with regard to the process of industrialization, which ultimately was intertwined with British nationalism. Now imagine a nation state which is controlling a colony as large as India, British India. This nation would want industrialization so that its people could earn money, its people could earn wealth, which ultimately would transform into the wealth of British nation. Industrialization is not only a means of technological advancement, it is basically a means of political advancement. That is why it is very important. The state patrons, for example, Royal Society of London, they funded only such inventions or such scientific researches or works which helped in the process of industrialization. That is why the progress of industrialization was self-perpetuating. What I mean by all this is UK wanted itself to be the richest of all nations, to be the richest in the world, and wanted to maintain this status for eternity. And in doing so, it made sure that the style of its progress, the way in which it is progressing, stays put, stays there for as long it is the country is there, the country exists. As we now know from common sense, this process of industrialization consumes a lot of resources. And this was one reason why deforestation occurred on a large scale. But there is more to that. Okay, so moving on, we discussed the third reason. Okay, so industrialization of England resulted in a drastic increase in the manufacturing capacity of the country. Now England was producing ever more. It was manufacturing high quantities of textiles. All it wanted was a new market to sell. Was there a new market? Yeah, British India. British India could be readily used as the new market. But would the subjects of British India or the people living in British India, they were still dependent on the local textile industries for their consumption. So would they replace their, would they change their choices? Would they want to buy from the manufacturing companies of England? For this to happen, the British had to dismantle the Indian industry, the Indian local textile industry. Okay, so how do you dismantle a textile industry of a nation as large as India's? So it's a very simple process. You just need political authority to pull this off. So United Kingdom would export cheap textiles from English factories to India. This is the undivided India. And there would be no import duty on British made goods. So here we have British made goods which are very cheap, very cheap. Cheap as hell. Okay. Now when textile imports are coming from India to Britain, you would impose a high import duty on these goods. So now these people, the industry which is working here to export these goods to India, is not getting enough revenue. Now, when they are not getting enough revenue, they are in a dilapidated or a deprived state. They would start selling their goods in India at a high price so as to earn revenue. But because Indians now have a cheap alternative, they would not buy from the local industry. Subsequently, the Indian textile industry died down with declining sales. So this is how you dismantle the Indian textile industry. Okay, let us talk about a few tangible and intangible aspects of the medieval Indian culture. You have stone sculptures, you have miniature paintings, then you have dancing, Ayurveda, theatre, Baju Bawra. Baju Bawra is of historical repute. He belongs to the times of Tansen, the great musician. Baju Bawra had a competition with Tansen in which he won, and all this happened in front of Akbar, Akbar the Great. Now you could imagine people employed in all these sectors. This is Meenakari work. Meenakari work. So it's a box with Meenakari painting on it. This was the culture of medieval India. You could imagine the number of jobs the medieval India culture created. And these jobs were in both the sectors, manufacturing as well as service. This indigenous industry was patronized by the royal houses and nobles. By 1850, as we have seen, many royal houses were defeated by the company. The company was ruling a large part of India, directly or indirectly. So now what we have is indigenous industries without its traditional patrons. What would this result in? Okay, so summing it up. In third, we talk about dismantling of the Indian textile industry. In fourth, we discussed about dismantling of various indigenously originated and patronized sectors of the medieval Indian economy. All this resulted in a large number of jobless people across the British ruled territory in India. This peculiar phase, which started from early 18th and lasted to the early 20th century, is referred to as the deindustrialization of colonial India. What was the result of deindustrialization of colonial India? Labor surplus. Labor surplus in both rural as well as in urban India. Now see, how would this have an impact on forests? People were desperate to find jobs. Now farming for subsistence was the only available option. You have to cultivate the stuff, the food that you have to eat. It has come down to this. Everyone who is now jobless is going to involve himself or herself in farming. Farming for living, farming for subsistence. So there is going to be a huge exodus of labor from urban to rural areas in British occupied territories. And this is referred to as the ruralization of Indian economy. Obviously, this process led to crowding of agriculture, the primary sector or the agricultural sector. People from manufacturing and service sectors are going to the agricultural sector or the primary sector. This sector is becoming crowded. So now, to remove this crowd, what do we do? forests which are available at the fringe areas, they are cut down, and cultivable areas are made available to those people who are coming from new areas, to the new rural Indians. Forests are cut down in the fringe areas to help them cultivate. Okay, so I would like to mention a finding from an OECD article. This was basically a research paper. I have posted the link in the description as well. You can go through this paper. It is very insightful. One or a set of conclusions that I could understand from this article was real wages of Western nations. Western nations, by this I mean Western Europe and its offshoot nations like Canada, USA, Australia. So the real wages in these countries has risen since 1820s, are rising even today, and were way above the other countries from the beginning. So from the beginning itself, from the 1820s itself, people in these countries were earning well. So this can be attributed to a rich nation. This can be considered as a group of rich nations as compared to others. Obviously, if they are rich, so they can be deemed to be a potential market for poor nations. What would a poor nation like British India do? Did British India have anything to offer at this point of time? Okay. So at this span of time, what was going on in India? As we have already studied, ruralization of Indian economy. Both of them resulted in Indian people providing agricultural exports to the Western nations. And this is how by 1850s Indian agriculture began undergoing commercialization. Farmers started producing cash crops, paddy, wheat, cotton, blah blah. These cash crops would be cultivated in plantations. They would be exported to the Western nations, England, USA, Canada, Australia. Traders would end up earning huge profits. Farmers can now at least expect to earn a good profit from growing these cash crops. What is the resource? What do you need uh, for having such lavish or such large plantations? You need land. Where do you get land from now? Forests. Increased plantations caused deforestation at enhanced levels. Construction of colonial infrastructure in British India. To control a country as large as India, you need to have infrastructure. Why? You need to have infrastructure so that your officials could be at the right place in the right time. So there was a need to have a large fleet of ships. This was felt since 1820s, when political hegemony of Britain over India expanded like anything, like a wildfire. Construction of ships require something, and that something is also required for construction of railway sleepers. These are the railway sleepers. Railway sleepers are basically the foundation on which railway tracks are laid. Since 1850s, as we all know, railway tracks were laid across India. This required railway sleepers. Railway sleepers and ships are constructed using timber. Where did this timber come from? Forests. Another example of colonial infrastructure, linear projects. What are linear projects? Roads for postal services and for transportation, telegraph lines, irrigation canals. A linear project by nature is an infrastructure from one place to another, traversing a large uninhabited region. In those days, uninhabited region were generally forests. So, if linear projects are constructed, then they would lead to habitat fragmentation. Construction of dams and reservoirs. If you have to maintain cities of lakhs of people, you need to make sure that there is water for daily usage. As British control across India grew, they constructed cities, large cities. And the old cities were inhabited by Britishers and their population was increased. When this happened, the city life has to be catered to. Dams and reservoirs were constructed. This would lead to forest submergence. Okay, so now we have studied, to revise whatever we have studied, British political authority, which spanned over India from 1765 to 1947. At the same time, we see an industrial revolution in England from 1760 to 19th century. The political authority over British over India, combined with the industrial revolution, made a ground for deindustrialization of the Indian economy. This led to labor surplus across the British Indian territory, which resulted in ruralization of the Indian economy. At this time, industrial revolution, the benefits of industrial revolution were also reaped by Western Europe and its offshoot countries. So you have these two group of nations, Western Europe and its offshoot countries, experiencing a high standard of living among its people. If you have a high standard of living, you would buy more. Is there anyone ready to sell? Yes, India. It resulted in commercialization of Indian agriculture. In order to establish control over the territory, building of colonial infrastructure in British India was really necessary. Commercialization of Indian agriculture, ruralization of Indian economy, and building of colonial infrastructure in India led to deforestation, as we have already discussed. What do you see here? A group of people hungry, desperate, about to die. Which event does this picture depicts? It's a scene from Bengal famine, 1770. A third of Bengal's population died due to food shortage. When I say Bengal, I don't mean only West Bengal. When I say Bengal, I mean Bengal, West Bengal, Bangladesh, a part of Bihar and a part of Orissa. It's a large territory and there are so many people, numerous people. A third of such numerous people dying because of food shortage? Okay, so they died due to a famine, not due to a drought. What's the difference? Unlike a drought, a famine is an artificial shortage of food. Shortage of food created because of human beings. Who were responsible for creating this shortage? British. Colonialism. And it is just one of the instances in which so many people are dying. Colonialism would lead to famines not only among the people of India, but also within the forests of India. This would be a very different kind of famine. Uh, it's basically a situation of desperation. Who was the victim of this victimization? Who was the victim of this famine? Tribal people and wildlife. They reacted to it. They reacted to this victimization or the wrongdoing of Britishers. The British reacted as well. In part 2, we would be studying both these reactions. Till then, thank you very much, guys.